They were just people who lost their way a little bit and let their egos drive. You know, Sean Hannity and Martha Stewart are playing Wordle and hating their necks and crying in the bathroom like the rest of us.
The title of the podcast was Slow Burn, and we kind of wanted something that was more descriptive of what was happening in the show. And you know, there's this term, it's a clinical psychiatric term called the Martha Mitchell effect. It's named after Martha Mitchell. It's basically when a person's claims are dismissed despite being true. But it means basically the same thing as being gaslit. And gaslit is just, I think it reflects the kind of take we have on the show, which is we want to do this period in a way that feels fresh and new and exciting and fun and also dark. And I think Gaslit kind of, for whatever reason, conveys all those things.
Mitchell.
I've had some disturbing news, sir. Operation Watergate. Security guards busted wide open.
The next 48 hours are gonna be crucial.
I don't know how to put this. We're wondering about your wife.
Y'all gonna just stand around, or you want to ask me some questions?
The question you ask yourself about all these people, whether they be around Trump or Nixon or whatever, is why are these people complicit in awful things when they know that Nixon is going to throw them under the bus the minute, you know, the S hits the fan, or Trump is going to throw them under the bus? And there are really relatable reasons for it. You know, they're doing it because they're ambitious and they have this kind of blind ambition, as John Dean did, or they're doing it out of because they feel valued, you know, by somebody in power like John Mitchell did. I mean, Nixon was his best friend. Or they're doing it out of pure ideology, like the ends justify the means. They're on some holy mission, as G. Gordon Liddy did. And you know, you really find these human reasons for complicity, and then you find these relationships that are affected by the complicity. And you know, what I found was that Martha's relationship with John, this deep love that they had for each other, really starts and ends with the scandal, as does the young love between John Dean and Mo Dean. Julia came aboard because I wrote the script, and they asked me, who's your top choice for Martha? And I said, well, who's my top choice, or who's my realistic choice? And they said, top choice. And I said, Julia Roberts. And they said, okay, let's send it to her. And it's like, yeah, sure, dude, we'll send it to Julia Roberts. Okay, yeah, let's, you know. And I just never in a million years thought she'd say yes, but she did. And she had one condition, which was that she wanted to act opposite Sean Penn in it, because her and him had always been, they have a deep friendship, and they'd always been searching for a role to do together.
One of the great things about portraying this particular real person, because I've played real people before, there was a lot of source material, a lot of archival footage, a lot of photographs. I could see her being interviewed and hear the ways that she talked and the way that she walked and the way that she dressed. And so there was so much that I could excavate from all those things to put her together in my interpretation of her. I think because so much of her is motivated and driven by her relationship with John Mitchell, that it really, for me, started with their love affair. And I really was so, it was so fun that we were able to find space in the show to go back in time to their first date. I think that it allowed you to kind of have a sense of where they started, that they weren't always these loud, sort of mad people. And I do think that they were wildly in love, and I think that they had this great, passionate relationship. And in the end, it was her downfall. And I think that without him, she ceased to feel like she knew who she was.
She went so deep with this role that I think people are just going to be surprised, but you're also getting this thing which I don't think people have really seen from Julia, which is this messy, complicated marriage between her and Sean, that it brings her to this very dark, raw place by the end of it. And I just think people are gonna freak out.
You don't own me. I told you, no more interviews.
It's a ladies' magazine. I will say how I feel. And if that gets me banned off Air Force One, I will fly commercial.
So you were banned from Air Force One?
You're good.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Liddy, for me, is, I mean, he scared me. It scared me because there's so much out there about him. I had to figure out some way in, and that was gonna be, you know, was he honorable at all? What made him human? And it really came down to, I remember I latched on to, I thought, he never named names. You know, he wasn't a snitch. He didn't tell on anybody. He was gonna, you know, that was something that that was a way in for me. And then also how he, you know, how he treated his family. You know what I mean? He loved the 5 kids and he loved Francis, and I was really taken with that. And so you see a little bit of that in episode 1 when I'm at my lowest point, when I'm dealing with my kid. And so I just knew I wanted to make him as human as possible.
You worked for Martha Mitchell's husband?
Yeah.
She's completely insane.
Loud mouth.
She's a truth teller.
Unreliable.
I love her.
Yeah, so John Dean became a White House counsel, and you know, was a super ambitious young lawyer in Washington, and you know, was really felt that he was given the sort of keys to the kingdom and accepted into the inner circle of the White House, and then very quickly realized that they were up to some pretty strange tricks, but he was, you know, very much in there, and it was all happening kind of in and around him, and you know, gets him way over his head with some characters who he is not comfortable being around or working with, and there's a lot of compromises that happen, you know, ethically, morally. And then he meets a wonderful woman in the shape of Mo Dean. They get married. She then realizes, you know, what he's been up to, and it's a sort of make or break moment for their marriage, and that's very much what we explore in our telling of this.
I think on first glance, it's like, okay, this is gonna be a quick date. I will never see this person again. I'm not really getting a good feeling about him and his Porsche. And then over the course of the date, she really, you know, when you sort of meet someone and see flashes of your future together, I think it's sort of a time-stopping moment for her. And I think over the course of our season, she senses that something is wrong, something's off, he's having some affair or doing something, and then realizes it's not an affair, it's not a hot redhead, it's mass corruption, and Nixon is the hot redhead in this scenario. I think it's a real love story between them. You know, watching the series, watching Dan play John Dean and all these other scenes where so much evil happens, I felt like watching it for me was like going to the funeral of the man I thought I knew who I was married to, and then all these mob bosses show up at the funeral too. I'm like, wait, what was your life like? You're so deliciously evil in some of those scenes, Dan. I felt betrayed.
Yeah, it's a pretty sort of schizophrenic existence that he has to lead at certain points, where, you know, he just thought he was getting in with the big boys in the inner circle, you know, playing politics, and then yeah, it turns out he's into some pretty shady business, whilst also trying to cultivate a wonderful relationship, and the secrecy versus the openness in the marriage, and the communication versus the sort of, yeah, clandestine skullduggery. Those are 2 good words. My greatest regret is that we don't include their dog Gucci, who features very heavily in certainly in Mo's autobiography of this situation. But I guess they didn't have the budget for a Bichon Frise.
Only one Bichon Frise allowed at a time.
Look, let's just take a breath.
My mama slaps me harder than that.
You don't own me.
Our job is also to just illustrate that these were just fumbling, dreaming, flawed people just like we are. And I think, you know, we're so used to having public figures be sort of the larger-than-life wrestling character versions of themselves. And, you know, I think our job is to show that they were just people who lost their way a little bit and let their egos drive. You know, Sean Hannity and Martha Stewart are playing Wordle and hating their necks and crying in the bathroom like the rest of us.
Where is everyone?
Okay, there's no need to get hysterical.
I am calling my husband.
Get away from me!
There is something terrible going on.
He's saying that none of it happened.
A lot of women suffer from paranoid episodes.
Put your nerves down.
Should the Nixon administration be afraid of you?
Well, I think you know the answer to that.
Let it go, Martha.
There's a great podcast that I listen to called You're Wrong About. And it's so great because it takes these stories that we're so sure we know all these things about and says, well, actually, you're wrong about all these things. And so it's a great lesson in all the things that we think that we know that we don't. And Watergate is a great example of, you know, anyone who is born from 1960 to 1990 thinks they know everything there is to know about Watergate. And just to be able to say, well, hold on a minute, because there's this critical piece of the puzzle that you really don't understand at all. And it also really creates a sort of a paradigm shift with the way that you see all the characters in Watergate, the ones that you do know more about. You know, it kind of has this domino effect on the whole story.
I think that this level of corruption and complicity is always in all of us. And it doesn't surface because of history or because of one man or, you know, the unique conditions in this time in history or whatever. It surfaces because we all have these same pitfalls, emotional pitfalls. Everyone watching this or reading this or whatever they are has done something out of ambition or because they feel valued or because by somebody in power or because they believe in something so fervently they're willing to overlook certain morals. Everybody has done something that in some way goes against who they ideally think of themselves to be. And everybody has this kind of compunction for complicity. And I think that keeps going. I don't think there's any specific era where that is not totally within us. But also everybody has this capacity within them to be heroic. And that just as complicity isn't confined to one, it's kind of more universal. The possibility of complicity is more universal than we think. So is the possibility to be heroic. And that often comes from just as messy a place as the complicity.
I think Martha Mitchell is such an example of, we just have gotten it wrong so many times. And I think that what we Americans like to do is say, you know, only evil people were pushing these voices to the sidelines, or were outwardly misogynist or outwardly racist. And I think that what our story touches on is how much those things were in the groundwater for everyone, and how for Frank Will's story and Martha Mitchell's story, it just was so easy to silence it. To silence both of their voices and push them to the sidelines because society was built to do just that. I don't think this story is going to single-handedly right the wrongs of the misogyny that are in the pillars of the Lincoln Memorial, but I think that it's a start to give a little more of a spotlight to the people who we wrote off as people who deserve one line or you know, erasure. I think Martha was a pretty incredible figure. I think Modine had one. That's our time.